Welcome again to the Something Wicked Film Festival panel discussions. We are talking about cinematography in film. So go ahead, and if you guys want to introduce yourself, your name, what film you're representing, and what you did in that film. So I'll start with you, Greg.
I'll be the second one to introduce. He was before me, so you go ahead.
Okay. My name is Greg Emeta. I am representing Camp Wedding, which I was the writer and director of. That's it, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. For myself, I'm representing the Witch Hunters Are Coming, directed by James Atkins. I am the DOP on the film. I've worked with him in few films, and they were quite good. I mean, with some prizes in festivals. Even I worked with some other directors before, and we had some good feedback also on some awards that won. So I guess myself as a lucky person with the camera and lighting.
Awesome. So we'll start at the beginning with what inspired you? What inspired you guys to, be a director and as a DP? What were some of the films that inspired you, that made you want to go into the film industry? And are there any particular directors or DPs that you looked at that made you go like, I want to do this as my career?
Well, for me, if you don't mind, if I start.
Yep.
I started as a painter in the past, and I did some art school in the past. So I was an artist, and I was involved so much by, just in paintings, drawings, exhibitions, and so on. But my passion was for photography a bit so much, which started back in probably early 90s when I bought my first camera, which was a film camera. And then I started to study photography. So then I moved from painting to photography. But still the passion for filmmaking was high. But the only thing that prevented me from studying filmmaking was the cost of cinematography, as you know, as DPs or film directors. It's very, very expensive to study filmmaking. But by the year 2008, I managed to enter school, even though I had a vague opinion on how films are done. I was going, let's say, the wrong way until I studied filmmaking, and hence I'm involved too much into photography and filmmaking, and I started to leave photography for painting for a while. I have no time for painting, but all I do now, if I paint something, is for myself. This is a brief about myself.
Nice.
I mean, it goes way back. I just remember, I think the movies that probably first excited me were all the things that kind of came out in the mid 80s. So things like Goonies, Return to Oz, The Dark Crystal, that kind of, those sort of fantasy films. The movie Explorers, I don't know if people know that one. So a lot of those Gremlins, these kind of quasi sci-fi fantasy
I
films.
remember the Gremlins, yeah.
Yeah. Back to the Future, all those movies were really influential to me and made me just want to make movies and tell stories that way. And I think the first time I ever did anything was one of those old VHS cameras. We had, that you put a huge VHS tape in and doing the stop action of a little bit of footage and then something moved and early animation stuff. And I remember writing scripts for a movie that we never shot, but I was planning these crazy ambitious projects that didn't happen. And I think I remember going as a film director for Halloween one year. And so but after that, I got very much more into city planning was what I was pursuing. But I quickly learned that if you're in city government, things move really slowly. And, part of my interest in city planning came from playing the video game SimCity. And, the real world is you don't get to play SimCity unless you're some kind of dictator. So I realized that was just moving too slow to me. But if you, in the world of film and theater, you actually have the power to create worlds that are much more complete, and you have more control ultimately. And so I also had an early interest in photography, and definitely my filmmaking all sort of stemmed from originally like shooting it mostly myself. And I have still a lot of films that, you know, I'm both directing and DPing. So I come at this definitely from that's probably one of the things I have the most experience of, that in editing in filmmaking.
Nice. Yeah. And with filmmaking, one of the biggest things that people don't think about is everyone always says cinematography is the unspoken art. It is the thing that really can decide a film one way or the other. And one of the big questions going is, again, everyone thinks about some of their favorite shots. Again, like everyone looks at Tarantino, everyone like, you know, the shot of, you know, when he put a camera in a trunk and they open up and you see it from that view. Back at the time, that was unheard of, and that was something that people remember. And so people don't realize that for a film, if you have a good DP, it can make your film. If you have a bad DP, it can break your film at times. So how, you know, speaking as a director and also speaking as a DP, how, when you are shooting films, you think about, you know, the creative side, because people don't think about that, about how you can be creative that way. And so, especially both of you guys coming a little bit from photography too, how does that influence you when you're deciding what shots to make and what fun things you can do?
Yeah, as I said previously, it was difficult in the past, but now when you have cameras as small as this, GoPro, you can put it anywhere on motorbikes, cars, hiding it wherever, and you can't even see it. Even if it's in shot, if it's slightly dark, you won't see it. So, I mean, things now are, I mean, even the equipment, they help so much now to create something, to create any style. But before, when we had the Panavision and the 35 mil or 16 mil, even the 8 mil, cameras were big, even the light was big. Now, I mean, you use smaller light in the background, you have smaller cameras where you can hide somewhere. So whatever idea you have, even from photography style, if, I mean, for myself, I go back to paintings. If I want to get some lighting or some technique, even in photography or filmmaking, from time to time, I go back to painting. Leonardo da Vinci, Caravaggio, Rembrandt, Velasquez, and all these master painters, they give me some techniques, which is lighting, composition, also stories. So they help a lot. But I know since the digital era kicked off, many people don't care too much about the past. They won't go back as far as 1600 or 1700 to go and look at still lives, try to see the symbolism in still life, for example, which the Dutch painters used to make in the, let's say probably the 1700 years. They just started, and they don't want to be like looking a bit early and forward. They don't want to go way back behind. But in film school, when I studied filmmaking, they were showing us some paintings. They were showing us some photographs to, you know, just for analysis or for analyzing them and looking at them and try to study them even deeper. And I was, I mean, for me, I had a chance because I came from painting first and then photography and then filmmaking. So I did it stage by stage as it happened, even in reality. So my teachers were always encouraging me. They said, well, you already have a passion from years ago in painting, then photography. So that helps also in filmmaking. But the only thing that I do, even sometimes I encourage people to go back to paintings and see some more details and try to see the idea as it is. I can't remember, there was a film director, I've seen it somewhere, maybe on YouTube, or a friend of mine shared it with me. There were some actual paintings that they were exactly copied on some master films. They copied the same painting, same thing. If it's a house or an alleyway and everything, exactly the same thing, they copied it on a film. Probably you've heard it somewhere, but I have seen it. And they compared the two things, painting and the film, and they were identical shots.
Yeah, I think
anything to add?
What?
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, it's what he was saying is like, what is it? The expressions like, you know, good artists borrow, great artists steal. And I think that is something that like we have all this history that we can totally steal ideas from and, you know, create images that have lots of tension in them. And that's to me what's really important in filmmaking is like, you know, coming up with frames and images that like reinforce the drama that's happening on screen. Also, there was a good piece of advice I got from film school. I didn't actually technically go to film school. I actually went to like theater design school, but it was at Tisch at NYU. So I kind of snuck into the film classes while I was there, and then sort of started pursuing that more afterwards. But one of the things one of the professors said was, you know, you have a camera, so you need to go where people don't normally go. And I often think about that when I'm shooting a scene, is like, where can the camera go that normally no one would experience this from? You know, so often I've got like the camera on the floor or doing these very tight inserts, things that, you know, people don't normally experience as intimately or from this other angle. And also just thinking about how every frame can reinforce the overall feeling and tone of the film. You know, like, is this a kind of film where everything's kind of at a diagonal, or is everything really orthogonal in this film? And, you know, the relationships between everyone in the shot. So to me, it has a lot to do. I definitely like think of Hitchcock as a big influence, because I love the approach there where it feels very intentional, but like but often you just sort of feel it, but there's this sense of it all being kind of part of a big machine that I think is helpful. And knowing that he himself came from like a kind of scenic design background, and then applied this like really intense, like the storyboard is the film approach to the project. But it means that like everything you can sense is very intentional.
Yeah, it's one of those things. If you truly, a good DP can kind of show, like, if you take the dialogue out of some scenes and you're just looking at the shots, does the audience still get the feeling of what should be feeling in it? And so that's, you know, really, really important. And so another thing that, you know, DPs and both of you guys will agree on, one fun thing that they have to deal with is sometimes the weather, lighting, night, you know, what you're filming. So how have you guys as DPs been having to deal with when sometimes you're getting told, hey, I need you to film this in the day, or I need you to film this at night, or we're filming in a car and we need to do that, especially with, like, you know, in Witch Hunters, you're inside a lot, but at the beginning you're in the day, but then for Camp Wedding, you were in the dark a lot of the time for most of the movie. So, you know, it's kind of not fun when you're having to deal with that. So how have you guys struggled, and solutions you came up with when dealing with certain weather types like that?
Yeah, I guess for the Witch Hunter was shot over 2 days, and it was lucky. We didn't have rain or we didn't have bad weather. It was cloudy, I think, at most of the times. We had interior scenes, we had a few external scenes, but it was okay. Some evening scenes also were done indoors. We had only 2 locations. One was outside, just outside the house, somewhere in London. The other scene was indoors, mostly indoors, and 1 bedroom. And that same bedroom was changed into an office, if you've seen the film. I guess sometimes you come across some really bad times. I've done some films before when we had bad weather, and then you start shooting in bad weather and then it clears. Sometimes you have cloudy day and then it clears, and you have sunny and then cloudy. And as we shoot in low budget films, we don't have the luxury of, you know, having a big blanket of a negative fill to block light, and then use HMIs, or you use any artificial lighting, so you can keep shooting the same scene even whatever the weather is. Whatever the weather is, I mean, it changes, that weather or cloudy. So sometimes we have to wait. I mean, it takes time to finish the scene, but you have to wait until the light comes up, when the sun comes up, or if we started as a cloudy day, we have to wait until the cloud comes, and then we hurry, shoot, and then, you know, if there is some light again, sparkle of light on the face, because that's damaging the edit. And I've done a film before in, I think, Crystal Palace or Alexandra Palace, and it was -6. It was winter, and everybody was shaking. Everybody was freezing, and sometimes we had some clear moments when we have no clouds. Thus, we had to keep repeating the scene, keep repeating the shot. So there were some, I mean, some ups and downs because of the low budget that we are shooting. We cannot afford, thousands of pounds to spend on one scene and block everything and control the light 100%. We just have to rely on whatever there is.
Yeah, I feel like there's often people want to think that every decision a film is made is like intentional and is supposed to be like their creative decision, but so often so many of them are just practical. Like, oh, it was raining for the entire production, so that's what it looks like, or we have to find some kind of solution to the problem of like, I mean, our film like may look very dark, and then part of that is because we had like 3 or 4 LED light panels, battery operated, for the whole shoot. Like, that's what we had, so we still, I think, did a lot with that, but it was definitely challenging. Someone initially told me, oh wow, so wait, you're doing a very low budget film, like a 0 budget film, outside mostly at night? You can't do that because you don't have the money for lights, and so I was like conscious of that problem going in. I'm like, okay, so I guess I'm doing something that's going to be a disaster. And I worked with the amazing DP Hiroshi Hara, who we just talked about, like, well, how can we get around that? Like, can we get a camera that does really well in low light so that we don't need a lot of light? And that was our approach. And then we basically had these light panels that were, that technology has really transformed filmmaking, I think, because you can just walk around with a battery, you're not running cable, you're not needing a Jenny, you can just light up a whole forest with these LED panels. So it was definitely a challenge, but we lucked out a lot with weather, even though it was seemingly alternately like too hot and too cold all the time. We didn't have much rain, which helped. And we had some cover sets when that happened. But even then, inside those cabins, like when it rained, it was a huge sound problem because they just have like a tin roof. So you really hear it. You can't get away with just being completely inside and pretending nothing's happening. So I do think, there's those are always challenges, but I think you can always find a creative solution.
Yeah, it happened before also. I mean, if you see, like, in 2011, we shot a feature film in the past, and we were shooting on 5D Mark II, and the sensitivity of the ISO was a maximum 1600. But these days now, you've got Sony A7 or even Canon 5D Mark III, or even other Olympus cameras or any other digital camera that you can even pass the 5,000, even more than 5,000, and you can still use it. It's still usable, even at night with minimum lighting, and it can still work. And also, for me, I'm not afraid of shadows. When I shoot a film, as you saw, the witch hunters are coming. We shot it. We used Kino flows indoors. And at the last scene, which was an evening scene where the girl splashed the bucket of water on that witch, that was the last scene we shot, and the light started to fall down because it was late in the afternoon. So I had to use a Kino flow outside, but we had to get electricity from indoors because there is no Kino flow with batteries. So because I used Kino flow lighting, and that was okay. It was usable. I had to minimize the shot so I can compare it with the balcony or the window as the girl was looking out of the window. So we managed to do that. But as I said, the cameras now, they give you good quality and they are very highly sensitive to light. When you increase the ISO, you don't get a badly lit pictures. Some films that I've done also, I went for almost dark. I mean, sometimes you can see really, really dim because I'm not afraid of shadows. Similar to some cinematographer that I missed his name. He was called the Prince of Shadows as a cinematographer. I can't remember. It's the cinematographer who did I can't remember his name, who did The Godfather. He had a lot of argument with the director, with Francis Ford Coppola, about the way he lit the film, especially if you've seen the film in The Office, The Godfather. It was very, very low lit, and they had a bad argument about it. But he had to go for that style. But for me, I took that idea from there. So if I'm lit in somewhere when it's really low lighting, I try to show that it is actually low lighting. I don't want to use too much light. I go for very, very minimum. Even if I have LEDs, I turn them down to like 10, 15% because I want to show that feeling. So we shouldn't be afraid, because now the cameras are helping us. It's not like in the past. Even some people shot on film in the past, you have only 400 ISO on the film, and that was your maximum. So I can't boost it. You can't have more than that. Sometimes even if you raise it, but film needed a lot of light. Old cameras, even digital SLR like the Canon 5D or whatever other camera during that period when the 5D came out, Nikon or any other camera, they needed a lot of lighting. But now cameras, you can even work with candles.
So I want to talk a little bit more about kind of what you mentioned. Here's another question. So like you talk about how, cameras have evolved in the last couple of years, and we've seen that a lot of technology now. You see stuff like with drones, you see a lot more films using drones now to film, big shot scenes. You're seeing different cameras, like you pointed out. You have you have cameras that are now smaller where you can hide them in places that before you couldn't because you have bigger cameras. So how have you guys feel cinematography overall has evolved in the last couple of years with the technology changing? Because now, again, like same thing with lighting. Now you have LEDs that you can adjust. Before, you just have your giant floodlight in the side and it would be blazing, and you just kind of had to deal with that. So how has that evolved as you guys have been in film?
I'll let you start.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think all that technology it makes things, again, it's like the fact that there are battery-powered LEDs means you have the ability to, on a much smaller budget, do things that big movies used to be able to do. I mean, there was always such a thing as like a helicopter shot with like a gimbaled camera, but most productions didn't have the funding to be able to use that. Obviously, like with a drone, you can also like get much closer to people than you could with that. But it's basically making these kind of big epic shots of like flying across a lake, into a location possible that was never possible before for low budget projects. And also the like tiny cameras, that is sort of like entering a new frontier that, was not really accessible to a lot of filming before, or had to be done in a very different way. Like if you wanted to get that kind of shot, you'd have to build a whole set to be able to get the camera into the position. And now you could be using just a location and still be able to get the same kind of shot of like up from maybe from like a bathtub drain and people looking into it, things like that would have required almost like a Hitchcock style construction of something. Like when you hear about all they went through to just get that one shot of the shower head in Psycho, it was like a massive endeavor. And now things like, I mean, maybe not exactly that example, but there's other things that are just more accessible to us now with this new technology. And the one last thing I was going to say is about in terms of the ISO situation, we were dealing sometimes with such low levels that even then it got a little grainy, but it kind of worked with the concept of the film that I wanted it to kind of look like a mid-80s horror movie that was like shot on kind of not the best film stock. And so there's just a layer of grain that was added to the whole film, and that way those shots don't seem so out of touch with the rest of the project. And so that was like just working with, like, we had this limitation of lighting, but it became kind of a creative, approach to the whole project.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, in the past, people were hiring a helicopter to do shoots from a helicopter. And there was also a built-in camera, which was called a heliport camera, which was about 10 meters in width or in length. And it had like a ball in the front, down in below. And that was remote controlled also. And that was huge. But now you get, cameras which are as small as a mobile phone that can do certain jobs as drones, and they come in varieties. Also, as I said before, technology is shrinking cameras. Like I have Hero GoPro Hero 3 here, but 7 now is more, or maybe 8 now. I'm not following anymore, but 8 I think they have now is much better quality. Even I mean, the prices are dropping because the Chinese are making similar. They just copy and they give you probably quite close to what other manufacturers are making for bigger money, and they just charge you half of the price or even quarter of the price. When it comes to LEDs also, if I want to add something about LEDs, they shrink now. I'm lighting up myself with a small light, which is half of my iPhone 8. Is very tiny. But the only thing that people go for cheaper LEDs, sometimes it doesn't give you the correct colors. If you go for cheap LED, again, Chinese, because mostly it's Chinese, because we don't find, I mean, Americans or Germans, it's very rare that you find these companies investing in products like lighting. Because most of us will go for Chinese, because I would say, oh, this one will cost 200 quid. I'd rather get it from China, it costs 40 quid. But then we just neglect a little bit about the quality that these lights will give us. They will probably give us fake colors, which you cannot color grade. And you will just have to struggle with it when you finish your film and edit it. And then you're gonna have to fight to get those colors popping up, because they would give you like I would say very bad graduated colors, which are really, really bad for filming, because we are after quality, and at the same time we are after a good price also, not just getting cheap equipment. Which regards to other technical things, like a small camera, you can put it anywhere, in the fridge, inside the bag, inside. Even I tried to put a GoPro inside under a bonnet, like a guy once he broke down in a store in a music video, and I had to stick the camera inside. When he lifted the bonnet to check the engine, you can get his image from inside. So there are these few things that, as I said in the past, it was impossible to have a camera inside. And as you talked about Alfred Hitchcock, and I know some of his scenes because he had the means to build the whole scene, like the shot that he did, which was the vertigo shot. The guy was going upstairs, and we see that movement of the stairs stretching. That was impossible to have a shot like that with the equipment he was using in the past, in those years. So he had to build the whole scene, and he put it on the ground, and he had to do it like sideways, like shooting it on the ground, when the whole scene was laying on the ground and the camera is on the ground, and they had to pull it with a dolly and doing the zoom at the same time, because that's impossible to have it done, I mean, actually on set. So I think this is what I could add in this.
I want to go talk. There's another topic too that people don't think about when they think about cinematography. We talk about having to deal with weather and stuff, but lighting is very important, and
it is, yeah.
Depending on what you get, as you mentioned before, when you're on a shorter budget, you can only do so much. So you have to deal with weather or dealing with whatever, but you also have to make sure that, depending on if the cinematographer and the DP and the editor are two different people or the same person, an editor can be a DP can be an editor's worst nightmare if they decide to shoot things in a weird thing and goes, just go ahead and fix it in post. So as a DP, you're trying your best to make your editor happy, but also your director and everything else happy, because you have to make sure that you're doing proper lighting, like you were saying before about your office. You want it to be low lighting because you felt that's how the scene needed to go, and that was your artistic choice. So as DPs, how have you felt lighting-wise, making sure, again, that you are properly lighting the scene, where it's not a thing where, like, you know, for Camp Wedding, for some reason you decided to have like a really like a blue lights in the cabin for some reason. How have you DPs decided, when dealing with color correction and dealing with your color gels and all of that, making sure that the scenes are shot in your way, proper lighting wise?
Well, I'd say that, oh, go ahead.
No, it's fine. You go ahead.
Okay, I mean, we had probably the most challenging with that, especially speaking as, like, I was also the editor. So the most challenging was that this final sequence we had that was meant to take place at dawn, we shot over the course of like 3 or 4 different days. So that, to mesh all those together and to have scenes that really were almost like broad daylight. One sequence we were actually shooting all in reverse, so that like we were faking dawn as sunset. So as it was getting, we were starting kind of in the afternoon, and then as it got later, we were going to what was meant to be earlier in the scene, which I don't recommend. It was I think it just baked everyone's brain to go that way. But it was that was one of the approaches. So there was a lot of color correction, that because there's only so much you can do to control the sun. But otherwise, I think the issues were trying to match what was going on in these locations, because we didn't have we had these practicals that, for instance, all these kitchen scenes, there were these big fluorescents that effectively act like kino flows in that scene, and we just had to fill it out with other lighting and make it match. But those to me ended up looking some of the best, So I think it is about, I come at this from a background as a lighting designer as well, for theater. And mainly what I feel like is that the lack of sources, like the having, stronger or just like simpler, the simplicity of like 1 or 2 sources, and not a ton of lighting is just always makes a more interesting, cleaner picture and frame for the movie. And it's just a more interesting thing to have like a sense of where the light's coming from. What drives me crazy is to see older films where it just feels like light is just coming from these completely absurd places. I just saw Wait Until Dark with Audrey Hepburn, and she like lights a match, and then it's like she's just hit with like headlights. It makes no sense. And obviously they had limitations at that time, but like even the angle of the light makes no sense, and it's clearly just there for visibility, versus something that's either more realistic or at least like seems intentionally stylized.
Yeah, for me, I started using colored gels in photography back in year 2000. So I started early playing with gels with flash. So I had that kind of feeling to have a certain image on camera. I wouldn't want to have it too much manipulated, except for maybe color grading or a little bit of adjustment. The main thing, I try to give as much on camera as possible. Even when I do photography now, I just forget that there is Photoshop. In my photography style, I just ignore that there is Photoshop and that I have to adjust a color or put a filter or put anything. It has to be done on camera. That's purely artistic choice. And sometimes when I worked with James Atkins, who's watching us at the moment. I feel very easy to work with him, very simple, because he's a director who cares so much about his actors, his scenes. He doesn't bother me. He doesn't tell me, no, I want this, oh, I want that. He gives me what he wants, and I just do what he wants. And then sometimes I give him some feedback, and we go over the scene a few times, and then we just do exactly. He listens to me, I listen to him. But there are some directors, you're lucky because you direct, you do the filming, and you edit. So, you are 3 people in 1 person. But for me, if you work with certain directors, sometimes they just give you some choices which are really bad for the film, and you feel it's not going to work. As a shot, it's not going to work. And you tell them, you try to advise them whether it's lighting. For example, they will tell you, oh, I want someone who is sitting in the room and thinking, and he feels depressed. And you want to give him that mood because it's late at night, let's say 4 a.m. And the mood should be dark. And he wants to show his face to the audience. He would say, because I had this experience, and the director was telling me, no, I want people to see his face. I want more light. And I told him, you cannot have more light because the guy is depressed. And he's sitting in the middle of his bed and just thinking, and he feels very depressed, very bad. So just a little bit of lighting, but we can still see the shape of his face with maybe backlight and a little bit of moonlight, making the scene a little bit bluish. So it's just mimicking the moon. But he just didn't listen. And I told him, look, this is the scene, it should be done this way. And I argued, and in the end, I just did what he wanted. But in that case, I was doing something which is way too much for me. It's like, I'm not trying to get you the image that I read on the script I'm just trying to do something which is not natural at all. And even that scene, when I saw it on the film, it doesn't look natural. It looks way too bright. And that's what he wanted. So sometimes we need, I mean, when you work with director who understands about cinematography and filmmaking, he will give you peace of mind, do whatever you want. And that's why I try to create something, which is also helpful for me. And I don't know if you worked with the director and who would tell you something which is completely the opposite of what you want to do, but
I guess I'm trying to think if I had that experience. I've definitely shot other people's films and had some experiences like that where it's just like, but we did, you know, but I think I just always would be like, how can this be super in shadow and super modeled no matter what? And sometimes they'd be like, you know, this scene is supposed to be funny. You know, I'm like, oh, okay.
it's not drama anymore. It becomes comedy.
But that's what you need, you know. And I have to say, the DP Hiroshi Hara on Camp Wedding was amazing at like both taking my good and bad ideas and then like sort of showing me like, you really want that, you know. And I'm like, oh, yep, okay, you're right. You know, sometimes you just have to see it and be like, he's completely wrong, you know. And then also proposing amazing things, like it was his idea to put the camera in the car when they opened it and they're all looking at the kind of dead body that eventually becomes the first zombie. And that is one of my favorite shots in the whole film now.
It actually revolves around, will be my next question, as since we have a director and a DP and your director is also in the chat, how is it, you kind of alluded, but how is it as a director giving notes to a DP, and also when, like you've said before, being a DP talking to a director, how is it working that relationship? Because at the end, you both want what you think your vision of, and like you said, sometimes it might be, hey, let's do this. I don't want to do that, and you go, okay, or they allow you. So how is that dealing with that type of relationship, director to DP and DP to a director?
Yeah, I mean, for me, mostly, I mean, I worked a few times with James, and he's quite good because he understands. He gives you that freedom to create. And all I ask is where the actor is coming from, how the scene is going to be. He gives me that feedback because most of times we go to the scene, well, yeah, all the scenes probably, we go to the scenes at the first time that I see it. So I have to think of my lighting, my camera angle and everything according to his actors and their movements and how they're gonna be in the shot. So, but I never had, I mean, sometimes when I tell him this is how I'm gonna use the camera or this is how it's gonna be, then if it's not good for him, he says, no, let's do it this way. So we are not gonna argue like some other directors that really, I worked on my nerves sometimes. I worked and I am, you know, like fire inside me, like, what am I gonna do? This is what I'm trying to do. And they just give you completely chaos, because if I put a camera and it's on tripod and I show them this is the shot, they say, no, put the camera on this angle. And when I see it and I say, look, the diagonals are not right, the perspective is not correct. And it's like teaching him what I'm looking at. And in the end, he says, yes, but I still want it from here. So I had an experience in the past, and I argued with the director, and we were shooting a film. It was only 2 days, but I've done 1 day with him, and he couldn't call me back the second day. He had to get 2 other DPs to finish his film, two in 1 day, second day. So the scenes that I had to do, I told him, okay, I will shoot this way, which is my way, and then I will shoot your way. So I'll do both. But during the editing, he only used the ones I did. But the ones that he chooses, they didn't work. And that's what I told him. So it was a waste of time. And the film, when I saw it, half of the film, it looks cinematic. The second half, it looks like news or like media, because everything is sharp. There is no background focus. There is no style. There is no cinematography. There is no film look. The whole thing is just gone. You can see the whole image sharp from foreground all the way to the background, which is similar that we see in the news, because they close the lens to f11, f16. And that's the reason he had 2 other guys to finish his film. They weren't DOPs. One was editor and one was He had a camera. The second guy had a camera, but he was using the camera mostly automatic. So he damaged the film, but still the film got him probably 7 or 8 prizes in festivals. And that's what happens when you're not communicating well with the director, or sometimes you work with the director and you tell him this is the frame because according to the script, I would frame it this way. If two people are arguing, so I have to frame it this way because I am trying to explain, just to express what's on the script. I want to put it as a vision, but they don't know exactly that much of cinematography. They just say, no, I want it like this. Because camera, as you know, camera, we use it not just framing a shot and shoot it or light it and shoot it. We use it and frame and light in the scene to tell something. It could be just a scene which is just inaudible scene with no audio, but it tells you something. It touches you in a way because of the way it was framed and because of the way it was lit. But people who wouldn't know much about cinematography, they will not see it. They will just think of it as, no, frame it like this, light it like this, because that's how I think of it. So that's, sometimes it's really irritates me.
I'll just add, because I have to get to my interview about the film here in a moment. But yeah, I feel like the relationship is a very close relationship between director and DP. And ultimately, I take it as like the best idea should win, but I think that's one of the hard things about being a director is you kind of, there's always this feeling that like every idea needs to be yours somehow, but that's not really what is going on. Ultimately, you're just making a lot of decisions. And choosing great ideas and exploiting everyone's talent, and you don't have to be coming up with like exactly what every shot has to be, and sometimes just leaving room for everyone to do their jobs is the best thing you can do for the project. Obviously, I think there's times where you just are more familiar with the material, or a larger plan that you have in place, like kind of your long game that maybe not everyone on the project is understands, and then eventually we'll get later on. So that's a time to kind of intervene and be like, oh, actually, I think we just need this. Also, like on Camp Wedding, by the end of the movie, we were just like, how few shots can we get these scenes in? Because we had to shoot so much on the last day to like finish the movie. It was insane. So it became much more about like, I think we can get this scene in like these 2 shots. And that was most of the conversation. Like, or what do you think is the fastest way we can get through this scene, or what's going to be the least problematic setup to get us through this with lighting and where the camera is. And so often that's also the consideration is like, that's a great idea, but we can't hide the lighting then. There's no way to get that shot, without doing something, changing the space, which we aren't able to do.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this panel up. Thank you guys for taking your time and discussing. That was some great discussions. Thank you guys for giving me your time. I hope you guys get to see other films and enjoy the festival. And again, thank you guys for your time. And I hope you guys have a good weekend.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.